All right, welcome back. So yes, indeed, we're going to take a look at the forthcoming by-elections and rerun elections in 9 states and thereabouts. So there's a sequence, right? So can we have a look at that? I mean, different there. You have the ones for state constituencies, federal constituencies. They're all listed there, such that you can have a look. And then just so you know, but yes, security has gone ahead and deployed across board. They expect everything to go in that particular fashion. So we'll bring that to you soon. But we do have Mr. Oluwole Osaze-Uzzi, who himself is a former Director of Voter Education and Publicity for INEC. He is a senior lawyer, Attorney General, and Commissioner for Justice for Edo State. He joins us this morning virtually. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the program today. Okay, so as things stand, we know different questions and scenarios about what will happen to security. We've seen how the IGP, the president, all giving directives in terms of what to expect. So could you start by telling us, usually, how does INEC consider these kind of scenario when you're going into elections with this kind of mindset and expectation and questions from Nigerians about what will happen about security?
Yes, there are two aspects to the security issue. You heard the INEC chairman there talk about the use of security for the deployment of materials, personnel and materials to some far-flung areas. The second one is election security on election day or in the build-up to the election. I guess your question pertains to the latter, and that is on election day. The security agents have a critical role to play to ensure that, first of all, election materials arrive, that thugs and other non-state actors don't come to disrupt the process. But in doing so, they must be quite professional. And the worry in some areas is that some security agents or agencies can be used to subvert the will of the people, to prevent people of particular persuasions from not going to the polling units or not voting in a particular way. And we saw that happen in some states, or they stand by when unruly people, thugs, come and do whatever they have to do. Now, that is a very worrisome thing. That's a thing of concern, because the security agents are definitely needed, but they must be impartial and they must be professional and they must carry out their duty in accordance with the Electoral Act and all relevant laws, that laws of engagement, which is that you secure the process, you ensure that the process goes on smoothly, but you do not do anything to impugn on the process. I recall that in River State 4 years ago, the role of security agents was called to question, where they now took over the collation of results. They tried to take over the collation of results. That is a statutory constitutional duty left to the Independent National Electoral Commission. So everybody has their own to play. That's to secure the election. INEC is to conduct the election.
But you know, I think sometimes it can be frustrating for those who are watching from a distance, who think, well, they expect INEC, security, all those agencies to work together and deliver I mean, it can't be 100% perfect, but at least a substantially compliant, as they say, legally elections, particularly this one coming up tomorrow, not excluded. So how does INEC usually feel, or have they ever felt frustrated when they do all the things they can and then they get to areas, sometimes, I mean, your agents are harassed or kidnapped, and then on the day particularly, you find it very, very challenging to conduct elections. Do they ever think, what more can be done if we've done all we can do, and then this other end don't have a, quote, all covered?
Yes, you're quite right. There's supposed to be a symbiotic relationship. As I said earlier, the security have their role and INEC has its own role, and they're supposed to work closely together to deliver on the process. It's such that it has now been statutory entrenched in the Electoral Act. Rules are spelled for the security agents, especially the armed forces. They are last line of defense when it comes to security. The police are the first line of defense. They're the coordinating agency. And apart from the statutory laid down procedures, there's also the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security Access. And now that is an INEC initiative to say, look, Let us all sit down together, election managers, election administrators, and the security agents, and work towards performing our roles. And let us spell out logistics deployment. Let us ensure that there are not too many security agents in one place and another. So coordinate the thing basically, and that has worked fairly well. Yes, there have been testing times between security agents and the commission. If depending on the perspective you look at it from, sometimes some people feel the security agents are overbearing and over enthusiastic in performing their roles. So sometimes, for example, when they say restriction of movements, even when INEC officials or monitors are going around, they stop them and delay them until maybe clearance comes from higher authorities. That happens. But at the same time, the security agents say, look, we're there to secure the process and ensure the process goes well. And sometimes they accuse INEC officials of not doing the right things or doing things that will endanger the process. So sometimes it can be testing, they can have testing times at times, but generally I think they work fairly well together. But we hope that in this election, there'll be that harmonious relationship so that each will undertake its own responsibility and deliver on the 29 states that the elections will hold.
Having attended that meeting yourself severally, so from what you've seen and the results and the kind of feedback you get from people, the electorate themselves, do you think that meeting is achieving the kind of results it was set to achieve?
I believe it is. Without those excess meetings at all levels, by the way, right from the national level to the state level and local government levels, without those meetings, then things will be a lot more uncoordinated. We might have more difficult things. Yes, there are testing times in the fields. Yes, there are disagreements between the parties sometimes, especially when you do a post-election analysis of what went wrong, especially where there are accusations of either party not playing the role it's supposed to play. And sometimes it can be frank, robust. I recall after about 7 years ago, after the situation in Rivers State, the top brass of INEC had to meet the top brass of the armed forces under the auspices of the NSA. It went that far. And some decisions were taken, robust decisions were had. And I think coming out of that meeting, they were able to go back to Rivers and the affected states and conduct the elections. So yes, as I said, it can be testing. The relationship is not always smooth sailing, but I think there's a level of, I use the word patriotism, there's a level of professionalism so that we must deliver. And although people often say that at the higher levels, yes, you have this harmonious thing, you speak the grammar, you say the things you want to say, but when it comes to the field on election day, you see a different, find a different scenario. So those accusations are sometimes there, but there's no other choice. What do we do without the Interagency Consultative Committee? How else do you go about it? I don't think you have a choice.
So Osaze-Uzzi, the INEC is going ahead to conduct this rerun elections in 9 states, and there are many who would feel that INEC should have slowed down a bit to see maybe some cases cleared out, because there are still some cases in court around the previous elections, centered around the previous election, not necessarily petitions. Should INEC have waited just a little bit longer?
By the way, I think it's 26 states. The elections will be conducted in 26 states. There's a hodgepodge. There are some elections arising out of resignation or death. You recall, for example, that the chief of staff to the president resigned his seat in the House of Representatives, for example. So there are those who resigned, there are those who died, then there are those specifically the tribunals ordered rerun elections in those cases. And when the tribunal does that, even the law for replacement, you have to do it within a certain number of days, usually 90 days. So these things will be completed within 90 days. And I think for efficiency, that's why they lumped all those ones they could into this time. But as far as I'm aware, all election petitions arising out of the 2023 elections have been disposed of, because the law says it's 180 days at the tribunals, 60 days at the Court of Appeal, and those that go on to the Supreme Court like governorship cases, it's also 60 days. So it's been more than a year. We've had 180 to 120, that gives like 300 days. So all the ones arising have been dealt with, except pre-election. Even pre-election cases have time limits. So I believe that all of them have been dealt with. This is an opportune time because they must attempt to conduct the elections within the time frame, either stipulated by the tribunals in their judgments or within the Electoral Act.
But some parties are already, let's use the case in point, Plateau State, where some of the PDP, for instance, is excluded from the from participating in that election, and there are already protests out there. INEC, of course, INEC will say they're a law-abiding organization and they will follow whatever the courts say. But should INEC not just give it a little more time? See how that can be resolved.
Well, the question is how much time. Look, some of this, if they're new cases, they'll go all the way to the Supreme Court. So how much time are you going to give to it? That is the danger in that. And don't forget that the tribunal states that elections must be conducted in these constituencies of polling units within 90 days. So if you give it more time, you'll be going outside the stricture or outside the order of the court. That has to be contempt of the tribunal or of the court. I'm not aware that there's fresh litigation in Plateau. There may be, but I'm not aware of any fresh litigation in Plateau. And INEC, I guess, is interpreting what the court said, that excluding the PDP or whichever party is excluded, because sometimes the court gives orders, go ahead and conduct a rerun or a by-election, excluding X party or Y party. If that's the case, then you have no choice. Only a superior court can set that aside. So you cannot wait indefinitely. You must get a cut-off date, a cut-off point. And I think in acting within the Electoral Act and within the dictates of the tribunal and court orders.
Is it possible that, or what happens in a scenario wherein if INEC goes ahead and then these persons go to court and say, look, we've been wrongfully excluded from the elections? Does that then mean, okay, it depends on what the courts rule anyway, but that's a possibility, isn't it?
Yes, it's a possibility. People have gone to court for all sorts of reasons, good reason, bad reason, or no reason, but they end up in court. And that's why especially the Supreme Court and to a lesser extent Court of Appeal have damnified certain litigants and their lawyers in every cost, 10 million, 20 million naira, because there are certain cases that should not come to court. Yes, but sometimes the court vindicates litigants when they say, look, you shouldn't have excluded us. Yes, that's a possibility, but there's nothing you can do about that. So you are torn between obeying the court order or waiting for the process to run its course. And any fresh case coming on will not take its normal course and go all the way to the Supreme Court. So you might find yourself in a situation where you are dealing with a matter regarding one election, 2023 election, and this case will last in 2027. So you're still in court in 2027 when another round of elections and the tenure has elapsed, another round of elections are due. That is the issue. That's the danger in just holding on and just waiting indefinitely.
Well, Mr. Osaze-Uzzi, there are some people watching us now who should be voting tomorrow in any of the 26 states that you mentioned, be it for federal or state constituencies, as the case may be. And Chamberlain cited the issue of insecurity in those states earlier. But then perhaps by way of dealing with that or trying to address some of that insecurity issues, what the IGP said when they announced that there will be a restriction of movement, restriction of all forms of vehicular movement on roads, waterways, and other forms of transportation from about 12 a.m. to 6 p.m. in these 26 states. What would be your word to people? And how would you suggest that they deal with the issues in any part of the country? It is happening in Lagos. We may not have as much insecurity issues in Lagos, but it's also happening in Plateau State. And of course, we all know what is happening on the Plateau at this moment. What would be your word to those people who need to go vote, who may be a little iffy about stepping out?
I'm sorry, I lost the first part of your question. There's lots of order there. But the advice, it's part of the issue about how valid, how legitimate an election is, deals with the issue of how free were people to go out and cast their votes. If there's a climate of danger and
Mr.
people don't turn out,
I can barely hear you. I don't know if anyone else can hear you. And I know that you've been talking for quite a bit, but can you hear me?
I heard the second part of your question about how the people of Plateau, what word would we have for them? I heard that bit. I lost the first part though. I don't know whether you can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you now. But I was just asking, what do people who need to go to these states, to go out to vote in each of the 26 states that have been mentioned, especially concerning security or insecurity issues, those who may be iffy about going out to vote because of the concerns, irrespective of the assurances of the IGP and the restriction of movements? What would be your counsel to them?
Well, let me be very honest. If I was in one of those spots where security is not guaranteed, I would be very, very worried, extremely worried. But we have to take the word of the Inspector General of Police and the security agencies. We have to take them for their words. But caution is the key word here. I think we'll look at see how things are and be cautious, be security conscious and cautious about everything that you do. If there's any sign of any danger, it's not worth risking one's life because one wants to exercise their franchise. So if there's any danger, then it's to beat a hasty retreat and monitor the situation. But I encourage people to vote because there's some people now who maybe they know they will not win the election, so they discourage other supporters from coming out while they encourage their own supporters to come out. And by default, the person who's not win the election gets elected. So just caution, caution, caution. But please go out and exercise your franchise. But if there's any risk or serious risk, if there's a likelihood of a breach of the peace, then I think it's a bit of hasty retreat and go home.
Well, talking about caution, and I also heard the proviso or the caveat that you ended with. In what ways are the caution that you are recommending likely to affect the normal voting procedure that people would normally go through? Perhaps you want to remind us what are the things that people should do before they go to vote, on the day of voting, and after voting. And in what way does this caution you're advising come into play?
I think the first thing is that if you don't have your permanent voter's card, there's no point venturing out at all, except maybe you are a party agent or you're a security official or you're a journalist, in which case you have to be accredited and you ensure you have your cards and your tag with you all the time. For the ordinary citizens like us, you must have your permanent voters cards, and I'll encourage them to go today to ascertain, if they're not so sure, to ascertain their polling unit. Because there's no point wandering around the city and walking around looking for your polling unit on election day. People might say it's a suspicious movement when they see you going paving up and down. So it's to ensure you have your permanent voters card and you go to your unit and cooperate with both the security agents and the INEC officials. Ensure that you just go straight there and you obey all lawful directives. You go there, show them your card. We are sure that it will read by the machine and then get accredited, get your ballot paper, and then you go. It encourages people, or people are CSO, everybody encourages people to stay behind and protect your vote. But depending on the security situation in your area, I think this is where caution comes in. You read the weather, you read and see how things are. If it appears safe, then stay behind and you might wait for the close of polls and the counting and ensure that the proper things are done. Their results are uploaded and also pasted on the walls of the, if it's a public building, on the walls of the public building, and that the IREV is posted so I can watch and see it on the IREV as well. So it's the same procedure, the same process as was used in the 2023 election itself. But the assurance that although IREV not worked so well in that last election for the presidential election, the assurance is that for these elections it will be used, and so we have to give the Commission benefit of the doubt. But where anything is going on towards, I think it behoves you to tell the INEC officials, no, this is not how you said it will be, or this is not what the INEC chairman said, this is not what the resident electoral commissioner said. He said you should do it this way or that way. So anything untowards, I think it's important to report it as soon as you can.
And that's a very, very instructive thing that you just mentioned there, for the people to be part of the process of ensuring the sanctity of the process and all. But then you have also invariably talked about the trust deficit that is greatly depleted as at this moment. Now, people who don't trust the process are expected to go out and vote. And it doesn't seem like much voter education went out from anyone concerning this particular elections, other than, just sparingly, perhaps among the political parties, political parties, not even with most of their constituents. So how do we build that confidence? How do we help people get the assurance that their vote will even matter in the first place? What kind of voter turnout do you expect?
Let me put it in context. Generally, voter turnout for by-elections are are not very encouraging. It's usually below the average for general elections. That's a given. I recall in one of the elections about a decade ago in Lagos, I think it was Bejuleki, it was a 2% turnout. I think that's about the lowest we've received. And even then, there was no restriction of movement. So there's no question of, oh, people were worried. And in Bejuleki, you are in Lagos. You know how it's probably the safest part of the country, one of the safest parts of Nigeria and Lagos State. So, and there's no restriction of movement. The roads are fairly good, accessible. I think studies should be undertaken to see why these things happen. So generally, contextually, by-elections don't attract the same kind of attention as presidential elections and governorship elections. So that's it. But you made reference to that trust deficit, and that, I think, is the greatest challenge before the Commission and before stakeholders in the process. Yes, 2023 has come, it has gone, it has left in its wake, and the dust, I'm not so sure, has fully settled, but fortunately it's settling a bit. It's already 1 year since that election held, but the trust deficit is still there. INEC must now go ahead, regardless of the outcome in the tribunals, INEC must now go ahead to try to rebuild trust. We saw videos of certain people destroying their PVCs, their voters' cards. So it showed the angst, it showed the frustration and the impotence that they felt that, look, our votes did not count this time, it probably will never count. But we have no choice. What choice is there? It's a rhetorical question. We have no choice. So we must, and I think everybody else, stakeholders, have a role to play, and that's why I guess you're beaming light on it, and that's why we're here talking about it. We ought to perform our own roles, but the Commission has a duty. But over and above everybody else, the political parties have a duty. They seek power. They seek to put their people in positions. We've complained about this times without number. We still have the same problem. They are not doing enough in terms of voter education and enlightenment. INEC can only give voter education on a neutral perspective and give as to processes. They have a duty to say, look, this is my party. This is what we stand for. This is our candidate. This is what we're going to do if we're elected. So they have that primary duty, but they're not doing enough in that regard. The media is doing a wonderful job about it, and as I said, that's why we're here. We must rebuild, continue, and start to rebuild confidence, and that's the dilemma for CSOs now. Is that, look, they were a bit let down. They felt a bit let down by the Commission. They felt a bit let down by what eventually transpired, especially with the issue of IREV. And people feel strongly that the Supreme Court went the way it did. Rather than strengthen the process, it's as if the process has been compromised somewhat, in the sense that you said technology, people believe the technology will be like a cure-all, and you did not deploy the way it should have been deployed. We must try now and hold INEC accountable. We must try to, if it means tweaking the laws and ensuring that in clear terms, the use of technology is mandatory, such that no matter how you interpret it, the mandatory nature of technology, and without elections, without accreditation, without use of the IREV, is invalid, and clearly so, and will be voided, then maybe more confidence will begin to return to the process. But just prior to the 2023 elections, I thought there was a lot of confidence in the process. We have to now, we're not yet back there, but we now have to keep block by block, brick by brick, try to rebuild confidence in the process.
Tomorrow's elections, will INEC or should INEC consider that as some sort of test in terms of whether or not the confidence that the people had is still there and where they need to improve?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of it.
So I'm asking, do you think that tomorrow's elections, should INEC consider it as some sort of tests in terms of measuring where they are with the confidence that the people have on them?
Oh, certainly. Every election, I really in some way just for coming on here that INEC said it's a litmus test. It looks like every election is a litmus test, and but this time more than ever before, this is the first broad-based elections, 26 states that INEC is conducting post 2023. And if you look at social media, there's still a lot of angst out there as to what transpired, how things. Even those who were victorious in the elections were not, especially in the presidential, were not so happy about. Some might say tainted the fact that you did not do, regardless of how the election will have turned out. It would have been so good if the IREV was fully utilized, if there are no technical glitches, and that's one of the problems, because people still don't know what those technical glitches are. People out there still believe that it was a deliberate thing. Maybe so, maybe not. We can never know unless INEC comes and there's some kind of postmortem, there's some kind of analysis. and say, this is what happened. These things do happen. It's technology, things happen. We have done all we can to ensure that such glitches don't occur ever again, such that there's a plan A, there's a plan B, there's a plan C. But in case this glitch happens, we'll switch over to the next plan or next. So these we just have to keep rebuilding it. I think INEC realizes that this is a test. We have the Edo and Ondo elections coming up. Those will also be further tests, but the turnout of those ones will be affected by what happens tomorrow, what happens with these by-elections and rerun elections. So yes, it is a test, and if it goes well, and I hope it does go well, then you can look back and say, look, yes, 2023 happened, we made some mistakes, we've corrected the mistakes of 2023. Trust us, this will keep going, keep improving. And don't forget that Edo 4 years ago in 2020 was the first full white election that IREV was used, for example, and that boosted confidence, that boosted morale, that boosted the belief by the people in the process. But somehow, and the subsequent elections in Ekiti, in Osun, in Ondo, after the 2020 governorship election, confidence was extremely, extremely high. But so this is the first stepping stone towards that now. If it goes well, I expect it to, then going to Edo, Ondo, we hope that the confidence will have sufficiently returned.
You know, speaking about it going well, I know we made reference to this in part about those who are excluded from elections, but I'd like to read the statement that was put out by the secretary of CUPP, and it was talking specifically about Plateau North Senatorial District, and they are accusing INEC of trying to deliberately disenfranchise a group of Nigerians who are supposed to come on and vote. Now, part of their statement says that INEC hinged its refusal to manifest PDP on the ballot papers on a judgment of the election panel of the Court of Appeal that has already been discredited by the Supreme Court as miscarriage of justice, unjust, and obnoxious. So they're not happy with that. Now, they went on to say that already the grounds that the Court of Appeal had no jurisdiction to entertain a pre-election matter. They think INEC don't have any excuse not to include the PDP on the ballot. It says, at no point was PDP barred from representing its candidates for any by-election, and as a matter of convention, a by-election is meant for those who had participated in the earlier election. So they think that INEC should have included the party's name on the ballot because there's no reason not to. I mean, from a legal perspective, what do you think?
I'm careful not to comment on matters I'm not exactly privy to. I've not read either the judgment or even the full statement that was issued, so it's a bit unfair. So I can only speak in a broad perspective. INEC has a legal department. There are several senior advocates. People don't realize at least 3 senior advocates in that legal department. So they study all these judgments. Every lawyer who handles petitions or cases on behalf of INEC is obliged to return with certified true copies of those judgments, and it's analyzed by the legal department and then passed on to the commission itself. The commission has several lawyers as well. It has a legal services committee that oversees and superintends what the legal department does. So they will study this, and they are human beings, so they make mistakes sometimes, but almost invariably they'll study this and interpret what they think it says and then go ahead and employ it. I don't know what CUPP, I don't know what perspective they are coming from. I don't know. Yes, it is correct. I like that word. The Court of Appeal judgment has been discredited, but it has not been overturned. The Supreme Court said, look, you were wrong, especially regarding the subsequent elections, you were wrong. But the National Assembly and State Assembly petitions stopped at the Court of Appeal. Fortunately for the governor, his case went to the Supreme Court, and it took the Supreme Court to say no. The attitude and the judgments were delivered by the Court of Appeal in the governorship was wrong, and the other State Assembly and National Assembly were predicated on the same reason by that same Court of Appeal. But as it stands, that is the final judgment. Court of Appeal judgment is the final judgment on the issue. They're not likely to revisit it even if an application is made. So as it stands, that judgment is final. It's not infallible because it is not wrong. It's actually, from what the Supreme Court says, it's actually wrong. But the infallibility comes from the finality of that judgment. So until it's upturned, and it cannot now be upturned, then we have to live with it for the next 4 years, regrettably. But it was a wrong decision from extrapolating from the governorship election and the reasoning of the Supreme Court. But they did not, and they did not say they could not, because the case wasn't before them, say that the State House of Assembly and the National Assembly they didn't overturn the judgments of the Court of Appeal in that regard. Only one appeal went to the Supreme Court, and that was that of the governorship. So it had to be specific to that case. Unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves in.
You know, Mr. Osaze-Uzzi, you being a lawyer, that matter indeed is one that a lot of people are going around that particular point, questioning how one thing would work for one evidence or one case. You said for this particular case, we're saying that A is right, and that same matter in another case becomes wrong. So there will have to be some clarity on that. But the question I wanted to ask you is, having seen this kind of situation that INEC has in some way or the other thrown up based on the elections conducted in the last elections, because the PDP will tell you that INEC observed the Congress that they had. That's the argument that they have back and forth. The one faction will say they were not there, the other one says they are there. But be that as it may, what would INEC be doing different to ensure that we don't have this kind of situation in this rerun that they're doing? Do you have an idea?
No, let's be clear on something. The attendance of INEC at a Congress or a convention does not validate or invalidate that Congress or convention. So it doesn't matter much. The importance is that when it goes there and observes things, its report will be taken with a high degree of seriousness by the courts. There are times that INEC has gone to monitor some congresses and the courts have said, no, you went to the wrong place. You shouldn't have monitored that one. Probably the wrong person organized it or things like that. So it does not validate or invalidate the thing. Most of these elections we're having today did not go through primaries, they didn't go through primaries again. Only the by-elections were due to death or resignation that the parties conducted primaries. The majority of them, a lot of them, were ordered by the tribunals of course. So it only involves the parties that took part in the original election, except there are some parties that were specifically excluded by the courts of tribunal. So it's not so much so. I think your question will probably be a lot more relevant in the governorship or other by-election and governorship elections where primaries are required to be conducted. For example, in Edo, in February this month, primaries are going to be conducted by the parties from the INEC timetable and guidelines within this month for the governorship. So that would be more of a test, and they ought to be guided by the Supreme Court decision. But don't forget, even the Plateau case, INEC actually, I don't think you can blame them because they attended the primaries, but there are other issues arising therefrom. But they should study that judgment, and if there are any pitfalls or any indicting feature in that, then of course lessons should be learned from that. More importantly, the parties will also learn from that.
Well, we understand that the police and the army are, well, some unclear about whether or not there's an attack on the Benue APC Secretariat, if they've gone there, but we're keeping tabs on that one. It's related to the by-election that will come about. We'll just double-check and get you more details as we get that one. But Ms. Uzzi, do you think that INEC can ever, or we should expect a better output in terms of logistics from INEC if we don't address what the chairman has spoken about at some point when he said the country needed to have a conversation about INEC's management or capacity to handle elections at the time where it was postponed, talking about logistics, security. Do you think we should actually sit down and decide whether or not we want to continue this way or approach it differently so that we don't ever have to deal with materials not arriving on time on election day, for the most part? Look, I think it froze at some point, so we'll try and get that connection back. Because we do remember that the chairman of INEC has spoken at some point that the nation needed to have a conversation as to election.
But in the military era.
Yeah,
in the
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In 1998-1999 elections that ushered in this dispensation, INEC relied a lot on local governments, state governments, and they could pull on national assets. And the idea is that, look, INEC is not a federal body, it's a national body. That's why it's called INEC national, not federal. So it's not owned by the federal government. It's a national thing, so you can call on all national assets. You can call on the Air Force, on the police, on local governments. So it's mobilized a lot of resources. It's a lot more difficult for it to do so now, because if a governor gives you vehicles from state government or local government now, the opposition will kick and say, look, they are given an unfair advantage. To an extent, the military is still regarded by and large as fairly neutral. So INEC relies on the Air Force and the military to help move personnel, to help move materials. It has tried different methods to ensure speedy delivery of materials. A lot of them haven't worked. Engaging the National Union of Road Transport, National Association of Road Transport Owners, and all the different professional associations and the unions in the sector, we thought we'd do the magic, but it hasn't always worked. There are places you go to in Bayelsa, for example, in rural areas where boat owners come together, and the politicians probably just go settle the leadership of the boat owners' guilds or associations. And on election day, they tell you either you double the what's due to them, or the politicians have, even against the agreement you have entered into, have commanded all the boats. So you are beholden to them. These are all the issues. And one of the plans made by INEC was to decentralize distribution of materials. So rather than go from the local government headquarters to the polling units, which can be quite a distance, they now said, okay, let us set up camps. And those camps are closer to polling units, and even the camps contain several polling units themselves in most cases. Somehow, I don't know why that hasn't always worked as well as it should. But let us watch how things go tomorrow. We're in a short of plans. A few years removed from the commission, so I don't know what new things, new developments they have brought in that will ensure that the polls open on time. But we certainly hope they do. If they do, then lessons will have been learned, and we hope we'll replicate the methodology in subsequent elections.
How insulated would you say INEC is from whatever vagaries that could discredit it? You've talked about the fact that INEC is a national body that can call on any national asset at any time, but then you are not also unaware of the issues that arose where people have a measure of distrust. So how insulated or how independent would you say INEC is in terms of its funding, in terms of its operations, in terms of whatever political influence or even judicial, whatever kind of influence that could derail or question its independence and integrity?
What I can say is that I am personally not very happy about the certain appointments, and I think CSOs have been very vocal about this. We're not so pleased about the certain appointments that have been made into critical positions, especially some resident electoral commissioners. There have been allegations of partisanship, of belonging to political parties, being members of political parties, which is contrary to the amendments of the Constitution. The Constitution says that for you to be appointed either as a resident electoral commissioner or as a national commissioner, you must be non-partisan. Unfortunately, it does not say what should happen to somebody who was partisan and has resigned, or how many years removed from partisan politics you can be before becoming appointed. So that obviously appointment of key officials compromises the integrity, impartiality, and independence of the commission. Where you have people you are beholden to those who recommend you for appointment, that is not good for the system at all. I recall that after Justice Akpata, the first pioneer INEC chairman, was elected, in his acceptance speech, he said something like, well used to saying that, look, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. But so with this commission, with the way things are, sorry, he who pays the piper has to learn to dance to the tune that the piper plays. So that's the difference. In fact, you tell me, okay, play this tune, you are giving me money, play this tune, should not mean that I should be beholden to you. You should learn to dance to the tune that I play. The tune that I play should be in accordance with the law, with the requirements, with the regulations laid down for the conduct of the elections. once you're tied to the apron strings of the person, once you're tied to or feel you owe a duty to somebody who recommended you or appointed you, then you lose your independence, and that's a danger. That's not good for the process. It's not good for the system, because of the way we are. It's different in other times where they don't have a national election body. In the UK, for example, the Electoral Commission does not conduct elections. It's conducted by local government. That's a particular European model. Most European states, local governments conduct elections. That cannot work here. It's not the way our system works. We believe in an independent national body to conduct national elections. But somebody must appoint these people. They must draw their funds from the government, from public purse, but they must go to the National Assembly to get appropriation. Unfortunately, for so many years, an envelope system was used in place, so there's nothing much anybody could do. They must go to the executive and say, look, this is money we want, and defend their budgets. If it passes that stage, we must go to the National Assembly and still defend that same budget. The good thing is that once the money is appropriated, it should be sent to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. So you draw on it. You don't have to go through Ministry of Finance or any other thing.
Well, it sounds to me. Yeah, it sounds to me, Mr. Osaze-Uzzi, that you are calling for some kind of tinkering with the laws that set up INEC so that it can escape some of these vagaries. That's conversation for some other time. We have to thank you at this time. Oluwole Osaze-Uzzi is a former director of voter education and publicity. He's joined us virtually from Benin City. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Okay.